At the 48th Phyllis Schlafly Eagle Council, we sit down with Heritage Foundation economist Stephen Moore, who played a major role in developing President Trump's economic policy. He is also the co-author of the book Trumponomics, Inside the America First Plan to Revive Our Economy. Steve Moore, wonderful to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So, last time we talked, I believe it was in May, we were talking about, the trade war. She had just walked away from the trade discussions, and tariffs were looming, or maybe even implemented already. And I guess I wanted to find out from you, what has changed? Take us through the ins and outs and how we got here today.
Well, it's like follow the bouncing ball, right? Because, it's just been peaks and valleys in terms of how these negotiations have been going. There was a deal that had been put on the table and that looked like it was 90% there, and then back in the summer, the Chinese walked that back and retreated. And so it looks like the hardliners, for now, have taken back control of the negotiations there, which is bad. It's bad for everyone. I think getting a trade deal done with China would be a big plus for the U.S. economy, but it would also be good for them as well. Right now it looks like there is some progress, but it's so hard to tell, really, because every time I think there's progress, then there's a falling back, and every time it looks like they're stalled out, then they call for new negotiations. I do think at the end of the day, before sometime in the next 6 months, I think the probability is there will be a deal. It's not really a great deal, but it'll be a first step in a new trade relationship, because we're in an abusive trade relationship with China. They've been lying and cheating and stealing, and the intellectual property theft is getting worse. And so we can't live with that any longer. There have to be new trade arrangements and new enforcements of our intellectual property rights.
Right. So, and the president has, extended the time when the tariffs are going to be put in place, and I believe he's even been talking about the prospects of some kind of interim agreement.
I saw that, right.
What do you think?
Everything's on the table right now. You're right that there's some talk of maybe delaying the implementation of this new round of tariffs as a kind of peace offering, right. And then there's also talk, which I think would be fine, would be a interim deal that gets us through the election. That would be good politically for Trump, because look, once the trade war has turned into a truce, the economy's going to go, way through the roof. It's going to, and Trump will, in that case, Trump will be very difficult for the Democrats to beat. They're going to not have much of a chance of beating Trump in a really healthy economy. So that would be good for the country. I think it would be good for Trump. But boy, I don't want to make any predictions, because I just don't think anyone knows. And the reason it's so hard to predict this is, that really, the ball really is in Beijing's court. Right. And will they make concessions, or will they just wait Trump out? I don't think anybody knows the answer to that.
Well, exactly. And so this is one of the questions. This has undoubtedly been the hardest president on the Chinese Communist Party,
and rightfully
in
so,
memory.
By the way. Yeah, I think Trump deserves a lot of credit, and he's getting a lot of credit from voters for being the first president, in 25 years to recognize, hey, we're up against an adversary here. And, we see this every day, as China becomes more aggressive in terms of their military policy, more abusive in their trade practices. So, I think Trump saw this, this looming threat on the economic and national security horizon, right, before anyone else did. Look, the Bushes didn't do anything about China, the Obamas didn't do anything about China, the Clintons didn't do anything about China. So, I think it's a positive for Trump that he's taken a hard line.
So, it's very interesting. There's also been talk from some folks that actually decoupling from the Chinese economy is the only way to basically, guarantee that America will be kind of, let's say, free of this relationship. What are your thoughts on decoupling the economy?
I don't want an entire look. We've benefited in many ways from the fact that China gives us all this cheap stuff. There's a reason we import a lot of stuff from China, because it's really cheap. And so that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with imports. They just need to open up their markets to us. And so a decoupling, I wouldn't like to see that unless they become a substantial security threat, where it's Japan or Germany circa 1939. I don't think we're anywhere near that kind of situation.
Well, what about Huawei?
Sorry?
What about Huawei?
Well, Huawei's a big problem. no question about it. Huawei is a security, so then you deal with that. I don't think you just decouple, and Trump has taken a pretty hard line with Huawei, but I totally agree. There's two different issues here, though. There's the issue about the trade relationship, and that's what all these negotiations have mostly been about. And then there's when China poses a security threat to us, then we have to take immediate and firm action, as Trump has done with Huawei. There's no question Huawei is a security threat in terms of these forced technology transfers that are, building, security threats against the United States.
In terms of an interim deal, what could that look like?
I was afraid you'd ask that. I mean, who knows? I mean, it would probably be a truce. It would be a truce, saying, look, buy some of our agricultural products because our farmers are hurting as a result of this, and we'll lower some of these tariffs. Let's do that, through the end of 2020, and then let's resume negotiations after that. And that would be a very small step. It would punt the problem to 2021, but for Trump's purposes, I think it probably would serve a useful role because it would put the trade war on the sideline. It would allow the economy to grow. But then you're back, in the start of his second term, right where we started, right? So that's the problem with that strategy. And I would actually favor that because I do think it's perilous for Trump, in my opinion, to go into the 2020, elections, the last few months, with a trade war going on, because look, it hurts China a lot, but it hurts us too. And I want to see Donald Trump reelected because I think, I listen to what the Democrats say, they're frightening to me. And also I think he's been good for the economy, and I think losing Trump from the White House would be a significant damage to America's prestige and our economy.
So, it seems like the Chinese leaders' kind of calculation is, will Trump likely get elected, right? If he does get elected, then we definitely want to try to make an interim deal because we have to, but if he isn't, hey, maybe we can, the likelihood we'll have someone that's not as tough on China is probably pretty high. Is that the calculation? That just struck me as we were talking.
I mean, look, Biden is, a kind of a rollover for the Chinese. I mean, he's been kind of a patsy when it comes to China. And in fact, earlier this year, he said China's not a big problem, a threat to the United States. And a lot of people thought that was a pretty stupid thing to say, and I would agree with that it was a dumb thing to say. But on the other hand, there's also a line of thinking that, if you get an Elizabeth Warren or you get a Bernie Sanders or a Kamala Harris, they've been much more protectionist in their rhetoric, because they're pro-union. So now what I'm hearing is that the Beijing government is saying we might not actually be that much better off with a President Bernie Sanders or something like that. So there's so many variables here. It's just really difficult to predict. And by the way, you're talking about another 14 months. Why not get it done now? Why wait 14 months from the Chinese perspective? I mean, this is really damaging China. You're seeing disinvestment. You're seeing companies leave and going to Vietnam and Indonesia and India and Singapore and other places to avoid the tariffs. China could go into a recession. They haven't had a recession in 30 years. So it's a high-risk strategy for the Chinese government to wait out Trump.
Oh, that's actually a very interesting perspective. There's all sorts of economic data or hints at economic data that things aren't going very well.
But let's not forget, by the way, that China lies about their statistics. So they say, well, we were growing at 10%, now we're growing at 6%. Well, most countries would love to see 6% growth, but there's pretty strong evidence that they're just making up those numbers and that they're really concerned about the amount of investment money that was flowing into China that's now actually going to other Asian countries or actually coming here. I mean, the United States is sucking up a lot of capital from the rest of the world, which is a positive thing for the United States, but we're just not seeing that money get reinvested, because when I talk to business leaders, they're saying we're kind of on hold right now. We want to see how this whole thing plays out.
People don't like to not know what's going to happen.
Uncertainty is always a negative for the economy.
Okay. Well, so let's jump to, you mentioned you were concerned about some of the economic policies or concepts for some of the Democratic candidates. Can you speak to that a little bit? There was just another debate recently. What are your concerns?
Well, I'm totally distressed of the left-wing takeover of the Democratic Party. Now, I'm a Republican, but I think it's good when you get two parties that are having vigorous debate, with good proposals on both sides. And what we're seeing from the Democrats is basically a war on business, a war on people who are successful and people who create jobs and create wealth. I'm seeing a lot of income redistribution policies, not creating wealth, but redistributing the pie. We as conservatives and free marketeers believe, hey, we can make it better off. Everyone gets more in a growing pie. All they're concerned about is, let's take from these people and give to these other people. That's not a strategy, in the medium or long term to make an economy healthy. And then I'm hearing a lot about socialism and government takeover of industries. Our healthcare industry, our education industry. There's all sorts of talk about the energy firms, basically being put into bankruptcy through a lot of these green issues, and that may be the most dangerous thing of all. What I call the climate change radicalism of the Democrats. I mean, this has really become a religion to these folks. And it's become, when they had their climate change summit. There was, they're going to take away cars, they're going to take autos, they're going to take away airplanes, they're going to take away, our oil and gas, they're going to take away our coal. That's, you're talking about millions of people who would lose their jobs under that kind of scenario. Right. That's frightening to me. And so, I don't see, even Joe Biden is talking a lot about these more radical ideas. So that's all the more important, I think, for the Republicans to beat the Democrats, because I want the Democrats to reassess, how they've let radical liberals take over their agenda.
Well, so one thing that I've heard is that, after these the primaries are where these most radical ideas are voiced, but then later, once someone is chosen, they're going to shift or swing. What do you think?
Of course they'll try to do that, yes. But the problem for the Democrats is they've shown their true colors here, right? I mean, people are paying attention. I mean, I always joke that, every time the Democrats have one of these debates, Donald Trump's numbers go up, right? His approval rating goes up. They've actually normalized Donald Trump. I mean, so as a Republican, I'd like those guys to debate every night on every news station. I want the American people to know this is what these people, this is not a fire drill. These are dangerous people with very dangerous ideas that are going to take away, your health care, that are going to take away your, want to take away the combustible engine in your cars. They're going to, require, people to pay a lot more for energy. Those things have real impacts on real families that will be very harmful.
But at the same time, you're kind of encouraging this reassessment in the Democratic Party.
Look, I remember when Bill Clinton became president, he was a genuine new, they called them New Democrats back then, who believed in free trade and welfare reform and balance. But we had 4 balanced budgets under Bill Clinton. I didn't like his personal behavior much, but in terms of working with the Republican Congress, a lot of positive. It was a very prosperous period for the United States. Bill Clinton couldn't run as a Democrat today. You kidding me? John F. Kennedy couldn't. Can you imagine John F. Kennedy being in front of that crowd? I mean, John F. Kennedy was pro-national defense, pro-tax cut, pro-life. Those kinds of things that just have no place in the Democratic Party today.
So, wow.
Right? I mean, it's just true. I mean, it's a sad, and now I think the party will take stock when Trump beats them and say, hey, we've let the crazies take over our party. We can't, the one thing I think is especially problematic for the Democrats, if I were their, political consultant, I'd say, look, you can't be pro-worker and anti-business. That doesn't work, You can't have jobs without businesses, right? Why are we, when I talk to business leaders, they're afraid of the Democrats now. They think that this is a radical agenda that is, going to raise their taxes, raise their regulations, make it harder for them to do business in the United States. The Democratic Party needs to be more pro-business and not talk about, the drug industry, they're sinister, the gun industry is sinister, the health insurance industry is sinister, any company that makes a profit is sinister. I mean, come on. The reason you have companies and the reason we have a free enterprise system is so companies can make a profit. Profit is not a 4-letter word. It's what makes capitalism possible.
So, actually just occurred to me again, so there's been some talk about, hey, is there a recession? There's been some economic numbers that people have jumped on and said, these look like a recession happening. What is your take on these?
I don't think a recession is on the horizon. I mean, it's a strong economy right now. I mean, you got 7.5 million more jobs than people to fill them right now. We've never had that before. We've got rising wages. The stock market, has been on a tear. Yeah, has manufacturing slacked off? Yes, I'm concerned about that. Industrial production is not as good as it was, you know, this time last year. So there are some signs of slowing, but no recession. Now look, I would never say never. You know, I mean, there's always, at any point in time, there's always a 20% chance that the economy is going to slip. So, but I think a lot of that is wishful thinking by liberals who want a recession. They want Americans to lose their jobs because they so crave political power that, you know, they just feel like that's collateral damage. We don't care if millions of people lose their jobs. We have to get back political power. And that is, I think, subversive and unpatriotic.
Steve Moore, thank you very much.
Thank you.